City Matters.
This is Alan Mindel with Influential Origins, and joining me now for the third episode of the Simon Deng podcast is Charles Jacobs, who is someone I know well, respect and love, and he's going to tell us how this story came to light here in America. So Charles, tell me how you came to this issue.
So I was a nice liberal Jewish boy growing up in Newark, New Jersey, and Elizabeth, New Jersey, and New Rochelle. And I was into civil rights like many of my Jewish friends. And I actually went to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And if you play it to me again, I can weep again like I wept then. And I was into civil rights. And I suddenly found out when I grew up and I became a management consultant. And I read on a flight, back home from some talk in The Economist magazine that you could buy and sell black people in Africa for $10 to $30. And I couldn't believe it. It was horrible. And it was only on page 47. I mean, it was horrible enough, but that it was on page 47 was as bad as that.
How is it not the head story?
How is it not the head story?
How could this not be?
So I thought, I didn't want to be a management consultant. I wanted to be a journalist and a writer. And I thought, well, if I could tell the world about this, and it wouldn't be on page 47, then the world would act like it did with the apartheid movement. My first idea was to rekindle the anti-apartheid movement.
Right.
Apartheid's terrible. Slavery's about 100 times worse.
Right.
Right. So I thought, we would wake up Amnesty International, wake up, Human Rights Watch. So I got very lucky. I met a Mauritanian. Simon talked about Mauritanians. I met a Mauritanian guy, and he and I broke the story in the New York Times. It was in the New York Times, bought and sold. And we told the whole story about the slave raids in Sudan and the enslavement of black Muslims in Mauritania by Arabs. And we got a huge response. And we started to build a movement. I got somebody who we formed the American Anti-Slavery Group. And I went to New York, and somebody introduced me to the Sudanese diaspora, the South Sudanese diaspora, and I met Simon. And I met a lot of them. It was an amazing thing. And I actually put together the black Christians from Sudan with the black Muslims from Mauritania, both whose people were being enslaved. And we really started to get leverage and notice. And the big part that was difficult was to convince the South Sudanese diaspora that we should not only talk about the mass murders, 4 million people, because they had been knocking on the doors of churches and have been saying, help us, it's a massacre. The Christians call this the hidden Holocaust. And I said to them, Americans have compassion fatigue when it gets to Africa. They don't want to hear about Africans killing Africans. It's a terrible thing, but they can get over it pretty quick. But if you talk about the enslavement of black people on our watch, this is a country that tore itself apart over the idea of one man owning another. That will ring the bell. But the South Sudanese, except for Simon, said, we can't talk about that. It's too embarrassing. It's shameful.
Right. There was this shame.
Of course. Of course it is. Yeah. Natural. But Simon was the one who talked his people into, let's try this.
Because he saw it and understood.
Well, he knows the truth. And the truth will set you free. The truth is the truth. So we had a campaign. And we brought Simon to schools to talk about it. There were other people we brought to schools. And we got attacked by Louis Farrakhan. Think about it.
Right.
Nation of Islam. What's his job?
Notoriously anti-Semitic organization.
What's his job? His job is to convince black Americans that Islam is the path to freedom, not Christianity. Well, he's got a problem when reports come out that Muslims are enslaving black people in Sudan. And not only that, but in Mauritania, they're enslaving black Muslims. Okay? So it was pretty dangerous for us. It was pretty dangerous for us. And I kind of always thought of Simon as he's a little bigger than me, as my buddy, my best buddy, and my bodyguard. Because I'd like to stand next to Simon in New York City when Farrakhan was threatening us. Long story short, as Simon said, we convinced a lot of people in Congress through our campaigns. This was 5, 6, 7 years of working hard and having talks. And
just saying that this was going on did not move the needle.
No,
people did not react.
Well, what changed them was we met a wonderful group of Christians called Christian Solidarity International. And our hero is a man named John Eibner. And Eibner figured out that if he could put on television, if he could show what was happening, it would be amazing. And he figured out a way to free the slaves. If we brought money to the Arabs at the border, that we could pay them off to go to the north and steal or find or fetch or buy the slaves that were taken. And we redeemed 100,000 slaves.
So when you mean you redeemed 100,000 slaves, because knowing a little bit of the story and your story, you went to Africa.
I did. I went to Africa. And
with money.
Eibner brought the money in a duffel bag. We raised the money in the States. He raised the money in Europe. He's the hero of the story, not us. We did the best. We helped him do this. It was his idea.
And you guys go to the border of what country?
Of this, between the north and the south.
Not Sudan and Western Sudan.
Yeah, between the north and the south. And if you make me tell the story, I'm gonna get very emotional.
You have to tell the story.
Yeah.
Because people need to understand. You know, we would think, people listening just would say, they killed 4 million people. They burned people alive in their homes. They shot them running in the street. They raped people and murdered them for fun. They let them out into the bush and let them be killed by lions and tigers and animals. Right. None of that moved the needles. They didn't care. They had children, 9-year-olds enslaved. You found out and nobody cared. The point is that it's not like, oh, we told the world and then they did something. They didn't.
Yeah. So,
this is the story how this actually came to be.
So what happened was, we brought tons of money. I flew into Sudan. It was an illegal trip. It was into a war zone. We were protected by the Southern Sudanese Liberation Army.
In other words, not flew to Sudan. He had to go to Nairobi, and then took a small flight from Nairobi to go to the war zones. Where the Southern Sudanese freedom fighter is staying, because these are liberated areas. Right. So we cannot at that time we cannot go through Sudan.
Right. And so I went. It's 110 degrees. It was pretty dangerous. I had to tell all my friends. I couldn't tell anybody because it was secret.
Right.
You know. We flew into Southern Sudan. I went 3 times. And what happened was we were being protected by the South Sudanese Liberation Army in an encampment. And we walked for miles to a place that was assigned, agreed upon. And we have photos of this. You could see it. And under these huge shade trees, there were 100, 200, 300 people, right? All girls and some boys. I mean, women and girls and some young boys. Right? And they were waiting, and who knows what was in their mind? Who knows, you think about the last night of Passover, right? The first night of Passover. Right. Who knows what's in their mind? Are they being sold to some white guys? Are they being,
No clue.
No clue. So John Eibner, so the CSI identified every one of them, talked to every one of them, documented everything. And then at a certain point, he brought the money, he counted it out, gave it to the Arabs, and he said, through a Dinka, these were all Dinka people. He said to a Dinka translator, "You are free. Don't think of what they did to you. Nothing that they did to you should shame you. You are now free." And there was a whooping, and I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
Because you watched people who suffered the same fate that Simon escaped.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Emancipation Proclamation. You saw people in the modern world in front of you, a fellow human that was considered an Abid, go from a slave to becoming free.
Right.
They were emancipated.
And one time I went on Passover. What else should I do?
Right. Right.
And I brought the rabbi from Boston University Hillel, and he brought matzah. And he told the story through a Dinka translator to the people that, like us, you should have a day every year that you remember your slavery. And it was amazing. We have it on film, and they ate the matzah, and it was a glorious thing. The shock to me was always that the human rights communities, the behemoths, the big ones, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they didn't care. They didn't move. They didn't like the idea that we bought them back. They argued about, you shouldn't buy people. We said, what? We're freeing people.
You shouldn't buy people. Meanwhile, there was no other way to free them unless you did.
Right. So it was horrible. And to this day, I'll never forgive those people who call themselves progressives and liberals and whatever, who didn't do this because it wasn't bad white people doing it. If it was South Africa, you could do it because it was we're not those bad white people.
Right.
But if it's non-white people who are doing evil, the victims of that evil get abandoned, and that's the biggest sin. That's the biggest sin.
Because it doesn't matter who's doing the evil; it just has to stop.
It's evil,
and it doesn't matter who's being persecuted; it just has to stop.
Right.
And they didn't care.
They didn't care, and they don't care today because
they still don't care.
Today, the jihad. We didn't know what jihad was back then. We didn't know. We just thought, Arab, whatever it was. The jihad has moved now into almost 20 African countries, and people now hear about Nigeria. It's in the news, right? The same thing. So just let me say one more thing. Comes October 7th, my daughter lives in Israel.
Right.
And she called me up and she told me exactly what happened. And I knew immediately that this was exactly what happened to the blacks. What they did to the Jews.
Is exactly what they did to the Southern Sudanese.
Exactly what they did to the Southern Sudanese. They came in, they raped women, they burned people, they took away women for slaves and girls for slaves. It was exactly the same thing. Because I was in Sudan, and I interviewed survivor girls, and I'll never forget. They're beautiful girls, and through a Dinka translator, she explained to me when the jihadists came, they lined up the girls, and they're going to rape them one after another in front of everybody. They're going to do it, and the first girl says no, and they slit her throat. And she's dead, and nobody else says no.
Right.
So
that's how fear works.
Yeah, and so I knew that what happened to the Africans is happening to the Jews, and
not just the Jews, but we'll get there in a minute.
Yeah.
So explain to me how George W. Bush made this better, how he came to it, and what he did.
So
because he's a figure of it's incredible the things that George Bush did wrong, and it's also phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, this is the man that cured AIDS largely in Africa, saved tens of millions of lives. So it's an incredible, how there's this dichotomy of these things.
So through the controversy, Farrakhan did us a big favor because this blew up in the news. And it was a regular story, it was going well. But when Farrakhan attacked us, and then when he got caught lying, he said there's no slaves in Sudan. And the Baltimore Sun went to Sudan with Christian Solidarity International. They said, no, Louis Farrakhan, you're wrong. You challenged us, you're wrong. And it was a big, big story. So all of a sudden, and there were other people working on this, not just the American Anti-Slavery Group.
Right.
There were other people working on this, and Christian groups in America were working on this.
Right.
And it got to Bush through his church. And Bush thought about it. He talked to people. And he said to Khartoum, which is the capital of the North,
Right.
you allow the people in the South to determine their own fate. You let them vote. Do they want to stay united with you, or do they want to have their own country? Well, 99.99% voted.
Don't want to be an Abit anymore.
Don't want to be Abit anymore. And now South Sudan is the world's newest country. And that was because of the work that we did. So we're proud.
In other words, as Charles was saying, and we have others, people like Bishop Makram, a Catholic bishop, who was being thrown out by the government of Sudan, a bishop, simply because he challenged the governments of the enslavement of people, including kids from his own diocese in Lubayt, and he was put in exile. And he was one of the people on the Christian side, especially the Catholic. You know, when you have a bishop who's supposed to be in his diocese with his kids and his people and so on, now he live in exile. He was among the people who was going. Even there was the first time I was debating Bishop, because I know him in Sudan, and he said, look, my son, if we go and buy them back, we do something. If we don't buy them back, they're still being enslaved. But there is something, because the West don't understand what we're saying. We're telling them this is what happened. They don't believe us. What we're doing by buying so that we can take somebody who doesn't believe us and go and witness and see things the way Dr. Charles saw it. We took people's here within even African American, former congressmen, Walter Pantry, if you remember, went 2 times, including Al Sharpton here in New York. He went to Southern Sudan and witnessed. And this is where the issue of Farrakhan become being known as he's lying, because he sent his journalists to Sudan to go and find facts whether the slavery exists. So all these journalists he sent to Khartoum came back, and we have to debate them. We have to debate them. Question was being asked, where did you go in Sudan? Oh, we were in Khartoum, in Hilton hotels. We were the guests.
There was no slave in the Hilton Hotel.
We were the guests of the president.
No slave in the presidential mansion.
But there is no slavery there.
Right.
And we debate them within the African American community in New York, in Harlem. We went and debate him in Tony Brown journalist on Channel 13, right? PBS. Yep. Yeah. We debate him in those, and he could not even defend. What Dr. Charles was saying is what Farrakhan went and gathering his 1 million people in Chicago, telling them that, you know, there are members of the CIA, calling people like me, we are an agent of CIA. Even we didn't know where the CIA is all about.
Right. Even though you're a witness to it.
I'm a victim.
Right.
What I have to do with CIA? I'm here crying for help. My people are being sold for $10.
Right.
So he went and described us. We are, in Sudan, there are 2 people. Some of them, they look like you and me. He's telling his people. And there are people who are so ducky talking about us. It was an insult. Yeah. Thank God that George Bush understood it. And George Bush was able to end a war, especially when the government, not Farrakhan, the president of Sudan, admit. Then where is Farrakhan fit here? If the president of Sudan, prime minister of Sudan admit
that there's slavery.
there is slavery, but he blamed it on war. So what happens, it is, and I call it a hypocrisy and double standard by the world.
Let me just
The
say,
thing is,
yeah. Let me just say one more thing about Simon. And so when 10/7 happened, and
this is what I'm going to get to now, because here's the thing. Every one of these experiences is unique, but this pattern that has occurred so many times, you know, as Simon was saying, he didn't know anything else in the world that was going on like this. Mm-hmm. But there has been ethnic cleansing, enslavement in other parts of North Africa, mm-hmm. ethnic cleansing throughout the Middle East and other parts of the world, forced religion on people, not just asking or convincing or proselytizing, but forced conversion, you know, the degradation of women and their rights. This was not unique. Mm-hmm. And as a victim of this horror, when 10/7 happened, all this that was so shocking to so many, there were some who had seen it before. And knowing the story of Sudan, you had seen all this before.
And Simon called me up a day after 10/7 or on 10/7. He said, well, we have to go to Israel. I said, there's a war. This is like right during the war. Why are we going to Israel? He says, because I was a hostage.
Right.
I was them.
For 3.5 years.
So I know I have to embrace the families of the hostages. So we went to Israel. We met with Natan Sharansky, and there are South Sudanese living in Israel. And Simon is
and by the way, those living in South Sudanese living in Israel, they're not slaves, they're not sub-citizens.
No, they're fine.
They're full citizens of the country.
Well, they're not quite full citizens, but they're fine. They're fine. They're free.
They're free.
So Simon gathered. He's kind of like the father of this young group of South Sudanese in Israel, and they marched. All of them. They draped themselves in the Israeli flag, and they marched from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem on the main road, on the main highway. So you imagine these Israelis driving on the main highway, and they see these 20 very black, beautiful people with draped in Israeli flags, and they stop their cars, and they what? And they when they hear the story, it's a warm embraces, and this was covered in the Jerusalem Post.
All the hostages.
And then he went to Hostage Square, and that's where all the hostage families were, and he went all by himself, just knocking on the tents of each one of these Hostage Square people, hostage families.
You know, when October 7 happened, to me, it didn't come as a surprise. It reminded me of the horror of October 7 every day in Southern Sudan. You know, if the evils Hamas wouldn't put things out, probably would not even terrify a person like me. But when they went and put the image of what they did, it is exactly what used to take place in my village. It is exactly what used to happen to my people. In other words, it was the routine that women being raped, house being burned, people being throat being cut in the name of Allah Akbar, people, the slave being taken. To me, it was exactly that. And I said to myself, I know it. I have to go to Israel. Even that, I'm not going to change what happened, but I'm just going to be there in solidarity. at least I will meet 1 or 2 or 3 family and I will tell them my story. And I will be there just to console them that I was in the same situations. Today I'm free, but I'm here
Because
to console you when you are down as a friend. Because this is not something, it is new to you, but it was not new to me. So let them see it in me. And I decided to tell my fellow Southern Sudanese that I'm going to walk. And I didn't know that they will just, all of them, they will come without me asking them. I thought I'm going to walk by myself. And we walked the distance which we were supposed to walk in 3 days, we did it in 2 days, carrying the victims. Each one of us have about 7 or 8 pictures. And we never got tired. Simply because all of us, we the Southern Sudanese, we know what the family goes through because our family and we went through that. Some of the young fellows, they didn't go what I went through, but most of them, they went exactly what I went through.
if they didn't, their family did, and
Yes,
that was the
yes,
story.
yes.
And all of you shared a commonality: the Israelis, the Sudanese, frankly, Hindus in India, people around the world have been victims of the same crime over and over again.
And I sat down with, I think it was 2 or 4 family in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And sometimes we sit holding our hand for 20, 30 minutes without talking, just holding our hand tight, so that will go into those who are being held in somewhere to let them hold on themselves tight, that the miracle can happen. And even when I finished from Israel coming back, which I went back 3 times, by the way, I didn't stop campaigning for hostage because I promised the family. I was all the time in Times Square in New York. And then I joined other community in Center Park until we free the last one. And I was there at the last people who was standing up for the last person to come out.
Altogether. Well, Simon, I think this is an unbelievable story that people have to hear today. They have to understand it. You know, those that don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. And I think we've all seen that before. And it's so important that your story be told. I know it wasn't easy to tell, but I very much appreciate you telling it.
And thank you. Before I go, and I would not go, especially being here in Holocaust Center, what the Jewish community went through under the evil Hitler, we, the people of Southern Sudan, went through the same thing in the hands of the evil government of Sudan, in which I was in a refugee camps in Southern Sudan, liberated kids, and in the evenings, after we were so tired the whole day, a young girl came to me to tell me her dream. Her dream was, according to her, that she wanted to go to schools and become a doctor and visit Israel. At that time, I didn't go to Israel. I could not comprehend. I have to give myself a moment to digest. This young girl want to go to school, which she would never go to school. There's no school there.
Right.
She want to become a doctor. She would never, ever become a doctor. And she will visit Israel. Even she doesn't know the map. She doesn't know the directions.
Right.
So I have to give myself a moment, and then after that I asked her. She was sitting down and said, but you want to go to school and become a doctor, then why you want to go to Israel? And she said to me in African, this is our peoples. This is our peoples. What gave that girl what she said, I have no idea. But now I know what happened to the Jewish community. I know what my relationship now with a Jewish community here in the United States, especially being with Charles, we become family.
Right.
When I came back, I have to ask Charles, I have to go to Israel. Just to achieve what that little girl cannot achieve. To achieve what her dream, because her dream is not going to come as a reality based on the facts. But that girl was speaking from the wisdoms. The suffering of the Jewish, it is exactly the suffering of people of Southern Sudan.
And listen, the suffering of women, I mean, today in Afghanistan, there are women that can't go to school. Today, there's a war in Iran because women can't even show their hair. So we pray for all of them. And I thank you so much for being here.